Hello everyone, this is Mrs. Williams and this is your first virtual reading buddy lesson. So there's going to be one of these lessons every week put on the home learning website so that you can exercise your reading skills at home that we've been working on in school. Okay, so you can find the text, The Hunger Games, on the home learning website and you can read it on the computer. Or if possible, you could print it out or we'll get one sent out to you. Okay, so what I need you to do is make sure you've got the text in front of you and make sure you've got some pens, highlighters if possible, or colour pens if not, or colouring pencil so you can underline those keywords. I've got some post-it notes so I can write down tricky word definitions and also some paper. Okay, so especially if you're reading it on the computer, make sure you've got paper so that you can create a glossary of any tricky words and make a summary at the end so that when you start reading next week with me, you know what's happened. And I will also be giving you a little bit of homework so that you have read up to where I'm going to read next week. So this is going to be reading with me once a week plus some independent reading or reading at home with the buddy of a sibling or a parent. You could do that as well. So as you can see, our text is called The Hunger Games. Some of you might have heard of this. Some of you might have even seen the film. But hopefully no one has read the whole book yet. Okay, so it's called The Hunger Games. So we're going to start off by thinking about what The Hunger Games means. So I'm just going to give you 20 seconds to jot down any ideas on your paper or on the text of what the words hunger and the word games make you think of. I'll demonstrate. Okay, so as you can see, from the word hunger, I got the ideas of passion and ambition, when someone wants something really badly. And from the word games, I thought about competition. So I was thinking maybe this book might be about people going against each other, wanting to win. Okay, so now we've done some predictions. We're going to start reading. So as I said, any tricky words we are going to look up online or discuss. So if you have an online dictionary available, so get that up as well as the text, that'll be really good. So I'll be giving you time to look up any keywords. So hopefully you can see this. And I'm going to follow with the ruler. So it's on yellow paper. If you're reading it on the computer, maybe you could get your overlay if you have one at home. Okay. When I wake up, the other side of the bed is cold. My fingers stretch out, seeking Prim's warmth, but finding only the rough canvas cover of the mattress. She must have had bad dreams and climbed in with our mother. Of course she did. This is the day of the reaping. Okay, so I wasn't quite sure what this word reaping means. Okay, reaping. So I'm just going to give you, again, 20 seconds to look that up online. So if you type in reaping and definition. Okay, so I got that it means collecting the harvest. So straight away, the character who's speaking in the first person, because it's it's the day that they collect the harvest. So straight away, I know that they must live in a countryside area. So that's where I'm thinking the setting must be. Okay, so also, we know already a couple of characters. We've got Prim, whoever Prim is, don't know yet, and someone's mother. I'm going to continue reading. I propped myself up on one elbow. There is enough light in the bedroom to see them. My little sister Prim, curled up on her side. Okay, so now we know that Prim is a little sister. Cocooned in my mother's body. Cocooned. So this means when you are all wrapped up tight inside something. So it's what happens when a caterpillar turns into a butterfly. It cocoons and then it bursts out into a butterfly. So if you imagine a baby tucked up with its mum, their cheeks pressed together. In sleep, my mother looks younger, still worn but not so beaten down. Prim's face is as fresh as a raindrop, as lovely as the primrose for which she was named. My mother was very beautiful once too, or so they tell me. So already here, I'm learning some things about the character of Mother. So I'm going to underline those key things or highlight them. So she's beaten down. Oh no, my highlighter's not working. That's better. Beaten down. She was very beautiful once. She's worn. So we already know that Mother's character is beaten down. So we're going to continue to read. Sitting at Prim's knees, guarding her, is the world's ugliest cat. Mashed in nose, half of one ear missing, eyes the colour of rotting squash. Ew. So squash is a type of vegetable. I think this is an American text because we call it a butternut squash or a marrow. Actually, I think it's a marrow. So yeah, we call it a marrow. So it's kind of a squashy, greeny, yellow vegetable, which doesn't really make the cat's eyes sound that nice, does it? Prim named him Buttercup, insisting that his muddy yellow coat matched the bright flower. He hates me, or at least distrusts me. Even though it was years ago, I think he still remembers how I tried to drown him in a bucket when Prim brought him home. Scrawny kitten, belly swollen with worms, crawling with fleas. The last thing I needed was another mouth to feed. But Prim begged so hard, cried even. I had to let him stay. It turned out okay. My mother got rid of the vermin, and he's a born mouser. Even catches the occasional rat. Sometimes, when I clean a kill, I feed Buttercup the entrails. He has stopped hissing at me. Okay, so entrails. Again, I'm going to give you 30 seconds to search up what entrails means. Okay, entrails then are the insides of animals. So she feeds the insides of animals to the cat. So I'm going to link back to where it says, when I clean a kill. Now, that's telling us that this character, whoever she is, she hunts. So she goes out hunting for animals. So she's living quite a different life to perhaps the life we live. So she goes hunting, and she was worried about another mouth to fill earlier on, when she said the last thing I needed was another mouth to feed. So it sounds like these people, a bit like the title suggesting, these people are surviving. So they're quite hungry, they're surviving. It sounds like they can't just go to a shop and buy food, they have to hunt to survive. So they survive, they're living a very different lifestyle to what we might live. Okay, let's continue. Entrails, no hissing. This is the closest we will ever come to love. So she's talking there about her relationship with the cat, the ugliest cat she's ever seen. Okay, let's make sure you can see it. I swing my legs off the bed and slide into my hunting boots. Oh, there we go. So definitely what we've been predicting there about hunting is true. Hunting boots. Supper. So I'm going to underline that because I think that's quite important to tell us about our character. She goes hunting to feed her family. So I'm going to write that there. Supple leather that has moulded to my feet. I pull on trousers, a shirt, tuck my long dark braid up into a cap and grab my forage bag. So again, this being American, braid is the American word for plait. So she's got this long plait and she stuffs it into her hat, sorry, and she grabs her foraging bag. Okay, so can we look up this word again, foraging? So I'm going to have to look that word up because I think I know what it means. I think it means something to do with hunting, but I'm just going to check. So foraging is when you search for food. So you might search for food in nature. This almost sounds a bit like, to me, I'm thinking that she lives almost like a caveman. On the table, under a wooden bowl to protect it from hungry rats and cats alike, sits a perfect little goat cheese wrapped in basil leaves. Prim's gift to me on reaping day. I put the cheese carefully in my pocket as I slip outside. So we can see there that she's probably got quite a good relationship with her sister. That it's reaping day, so it's the day of the harvest, and her sister's given her a gift. Our part of District 12, nicknamed the Seam, is usually crawling with coal miners heading out to the morning shift at this hour. Men and women with hunched shoulders, swollen knuckles, many who have long since stopped trying to scrub the coal dust out of their broken nails, the lines of their sunken faces. But today the black cinder streets are empty. Shutters on the squat grey houses are closed. The reaping isn't until 2. May as well sleep in, if you can. Okay, so in this paragraph, there's been a lot said about setting, descriptions, lots of adjectives, lots of colour imagery. Okay, what I'd like you to do, and again, I'm going to give you a minute to do this. I'd like you to go through and highlight any adjectives or descriptions of the setting for me. So the place that she lives is District 12, nicknamed the Seam. So I'm just going to highlight that for you and give you a bit of time to highlight any descriptions or write down on your paper the descriptions. Okay, so it's usually crawling with coal miners. So it's full of coal miners going to work. So we know they're hunters, they're coal miners. So it sounds like people that work really hard. Men and women with hunched shoulders, swollen knuckles. Okay, what else have we got? The black cinder streets. So cinders are kind of like when you imagine when coal gets burnt, what's left over. So we can imagine it's very polluted. It's very dark, so I'm going to add dark. Sounds quite miserable. It's quite a miserable setting, isn't it? Are empty. So the streets are quite empty and quiet. It gives us an ominous sense there, so a sense that something might happen. Perhaps it foreshadows fear. If the streets are empty, it's usually because people are scared. Shutters on the squat grey houses. So squat means really small, low down. So the squat grey houses, again, that grey is quite a miserable colour. So I'm just going to link that to the word miserable. The reaping isn't until 2. May as well sleep in if you can. Again, I've got this sense of fear here. The idea that if you can sleep. So I'm going to put this sort of sentence here. I'm just going to put foreshadows danger. Because I think there's a sense of fear in the air. Sounds like whatever the day of reaping is, it's quite a big deal. Something perhaps dangerous. So a sense of fear foreshadows danger. Okay, I'm going to continue to read. So if you want to get those notes written down or write them in your own words, that's fine. Our house is almost at the edge of the seam. I only have to pass a few gates to reach the scruffy field called the meadow. Separating the meadow from the woods, in fact enclosing all of District 12, is a high chain link fence topped with barbed wire loops. Sounds strange. So she lives somewhere where there's fences and barbed wire loops. So it doesn't really sound like a world we understand or know. It sounds like some sort of dystopian world. Now, dystopian means a nightmare world. So I'm going to write that word for you. So it sounds like she's living in some sort of nightmare world where there's barbed wire keeping you in. You have to go hunting for food. I'm just put dystopian and nightmare world. So they're quite, perhaps what you could do is you could look up dystopian and have a think about what that word means. Right. In theory, it's supposed to be electrified 24 hours a day as a deterrent to the predators that live in the woods. So deterrent means to stop. The predators, so again, predators, rather than looking this one up in the online dictionary, let's just think, do we know what a predator is? Could we replace that with anything we know? So a predator, for example, I know a lion is a predator. So a predator is someone, an animal that looks for victims. So something that looks for victims. So how could we write that in our own words? I'm just going to use the online dictionary. Okay, brilliant. So someone who preys on something. So someone who preys on something. So that's what a predator is. Hopefully you can see that. Again, that's bringing up this sense of fear. Packs of wild dogs, lone cougars, bears that used to threaten our streets. So they used to have wild animals on their streets. Again, it links to this idea of a nightmare world. And now they've got these electric fences keeping them out. But since we're lucky to get 2 or 3 hours of electricity in the evenings, it's usually safe to touch. Even so, I always take a moment to listen carefully for the hum. That means the fence is live. Right now, it's silent as stone, concealed by a clump of bushes. I flatten out on my belly and slide under a 2-foot stretch that's been loose for years. There are several other weak spots in the fence, but this one is close to home. I almost always enter the woods here. So it sounds like she's not allowed to do what she's doing. So she's sneaking out. She's sneaking out of her district, out of District 12. But why does she have to stay in? That makes me think, makes me question. As soon as I'm in the trees, I retrieve a bow and sheath of arrows. So a sheath of arrows is what you would hold all your arrows in, if you imagine an archer, from a hollow log. Electrified or not, the fence has been successful at keeping the flesh eaters out of District 12. Inside the woods, they roam freely, and there are added concerns like venomous snakes. So again, venomous, I'm going to think, I do sort of know what it means. I'm going to replace it with a word that I understand. Venomous is a really good word, but I know it means poisonous. So I'm just going to put poison. So that's another way to work out tricky words. Think about words that you know it means the same, but perhaps are easier to understand. Snakes, rabid animals, and no real path to follow. So it sounds like our character is putting herself in danger. She's gone out into this wild wood. But there's also food if you know how to find it. My father knew, and he taught me some before he was blown to bits in a mine explosion. There was nothing even to bury. I was 11 then. 5 years later, I still wake up screaming for him to run. Wow, so we've just found out quite a lot of important information about our character's dad and who she is. So, her father taught her how to hunt, but he was blown to bits in a mine explosion. She was 11 then, and it's 5 years later. So just jot down there, a little bit of maths practice. How old is our character now? Yep, she's 16. And so her father has died. So it sounds like her father perhaps was a bit of a role model with the hunting, and she's probably taken after him. Perhaps she's had to step into his footsteps to be the breadwinner. So father's died and she's 16, our character, and she's out hunting. So we're building a bit of a summary of our character. So later on, when you finish chapter 1, what I'd like you to do is you're going to write down a bullet point summary of what's happened in this chapter. So what you might write down about your character is that they are 16, that their father has died, that they provide for their mum and little sister Primrose. Okay, so these are all things you might think that they hunt for a living. Even though trespassing in the woods is illegal and poaching carries the severest of penalties, more people would risk it if they had weapons. But most are not bold enough to venture out with just a knife. My bow is a rarity crafted by my father along with a few others that I keep well hidden in the woods, carefully wrapped in waterproof covers. My father could have made good money selling them, but if the officials found out, he would have been publicly executed for inciting a rebellion. Most of the peacekeepers turn a blind eye to the few of us who hunt because they're as hungry for fresh meat as anybody is. In fact, they're among our best customers. But the idea that someone might be arming the scene would never have been allowed. Right, so we're finding out more. So wherever they live, it says here that they are controlled by some people called peacekeepers. And that if her father had sold the bows, the officials would have publicly executed him because they thought he might be rebelling. So it sounds like wherever they live, they're being controlled by these officials. So these people are controllers. And if anyone tries to rebel against them, they'll be publicly executed. And executed means, chopping someone's head off, so publicly murdered. So it sounds very strict where they live. But they said that they don't mind a few people hunting so that they can get the fresh meat. So it sounds a little bit corrupt as well. So it sounds a little bit dodgy, corrupt. Okay, so controllers, murdered. In the fall, a few brave souls sneak into the woods to harvest apples, but always in sight of the meadow, always close enough to run back to the safety of District 12 if trouble arises. District 12, where you can starve to death in safety. It sounds like District 12 where they live, they're struggling for food. So it sounds like they live in certain areas where they're controlled by people they can't rebel against, and the people living there are struggling for food. So that's a little summary. You might want to jot some of that down. Then I glanced quickly over my shoulder. Even here, even in the middle of nowhere, you worry someone might overhear you. When I was younger, I scared my mother to death. The things I would blurt out about District 12. About the people who rule our country. Panem. From the far-off city called the capital. Okay, so we know that the country is called Panem. That's not a country we know, is it? So I think that this is a made-up place. Like I said, dystopian, a bit of a nightmare world. And the capital of that city is called the capital. So it's definitely a made-up place. So it's perhaps a fantasy land. Eventually, I understood this would only lead us to more trouble. So I learned to hold my tongue and to turn my features into an indifferent mask so that no one could ever read my thoughts. Do my work quietly in school. Make only polite small talk in the public market. Discuss little more than trades in the hob, which is the black market where I make most of my money. So a black market is illegal. So it means when you're perhaps selling things that you don't have any rights to sell, when you are things that are not allowed, you're selling them on. So for example, you might have a black market in our world of guns where people sell them. So it's selling things illegally. Even at home, where I am less pleasant, I avoid discussing tricky topics like the reaping or food shortages or the Hunger Games. So we've got some questions. What are the Hunger Games? What's the reaping? So we know it's something to do with harvest. So I'm going to put a big question mark. What is that? Prim might begin to repeat my words, and then where would we be? So it sounds like they sort of live in fear. They live in a bit of fear of being found out to be a rebel because they could be murdered. So we've already got that sense of fear. In the woods waits the only person with whom I can be myself, Gale. I can feel the muscles in my face relaxing, my pace quickening as I climb the hills to our place, a rock ledge overlooking a valley. A thicket of berry bushes protects it from unwanted eyes. The sight of him waiting there brings on a smile. Gale says I never smile except in the woods. So we've got a new character here, Gale. Gale is the only person she can be herself around. Hey Catnip, says Gale. My real name is Katniss. So finally we know how old our 16-year-old hunter is. She's called Katniss. But when I first told him, I'd barely whispered it, so he thought I'd said catnip. Then, when this crazy lynx started following me around the woods, looking for handouts, it became his official nickname for me. So a lynx is like a big cat, a big wild cat. So she's living quite a dangerous life. It became his official nickname for me. I finally had to kill the lynx because he scared off game. Game's things like deers, so she's been hunting them for food to go sell back in District 12 and for her family to eat. I almost regretted it because he wasn't bad company, but I got a decent price for his pelt. Pelt is another word for what you can hunt. So it's what he was trying to hunt. It was his victim, the meat he was trying to hunt, but she stole off him because it sounds a bit like they're everyone against each other. Look what I shot, Gale holds up a loaf of bread with an arrow stuck in it, and I laugh. It's real bakery bread, not the flat, dense loaves we make from our grain rations. I take it in my hands, pull out the arrow and hold the puncture in the crust to my nose, inhaling the fragrance that makes my mouth flood with saliva. Fine bread like this is for special occasions. Okay, so she's obviously really hungry, and today, the day of the reaping, is a special day, which we know now. So I'm going to pause there with the questions about what is the day of the reaping. So I'm going to write that question, and I would like you guys to find out for next week. What is the day of the reaping? So we already know about Katniss. She's 16. She has to hunt for a living. We know some information about her family. For example, her dad and her sister. So what is the day of the reaping? What is the Hunger Games? So there's two questions there. What are the Hunger Games? So, by next, what are the Hunger Games? So by next week, I would like you to have read at home the rest of chapter 1 and also chapter 2. And then next week, I'm going to begin on chapter 3. So that's your homework, the rest of chapter 1 and chapter 2. Now, before I start reading chapter 3, there's going to be a 5-minute quiz, which I'll expect you to write the answers down to see how well you've understood chapter 1 and 2. So you can read these in your 20 minutes reading a day, which you really need to be keeping up with to keep exercising your reading skills at home. And you can also read these with a member of your family. Okay, so we're going to start with chapter 3 next week for our weekly reading buddy session. Thank you. I enjoyed that, and I really hope you're all keeping well and keeping up with your reading at home. So chapter 3 next week, guys, and there'll be a little quiz at the beginning.